Okay, so first off, this is more of a funny horror story than anything else. Nothing too crazy, and frankly, I kinda deserved a bit of it. Figured everyone else could use a bit of a light-hearted story this time. So this happened a few months ago, and while preparing for the upcoming session's food, our DM shows up with another person in a suit. Like, I'm here for an interview suit. I just imagine this is how Baron Durop from Dungeon Masterpiece shows up to all of his D&D games. Anyway, back to the story. It was a bit of a surprise, but I think I missed something from the group chat. The two come in. Dog says hi to DM in her good girl way, and then hides from the suit. Me. Hey there. Sorry about the dog. She just needs a bit to get used to you. So, DM, who's the suit? DM. He's my cousin. We just got back from church. Not gonna lie. Suit was still a bit shy around us, but adding a chair at the table isn't hard. We got ourselves situated. The rogue is shooting me daggers about an in-character choice made because they didn't let me know. Hey, keep them out of this room. It's my room, and I got some personal stuff I don't want others to see. And we're left with Suit and my characters. Me. So, Suit, what got you into this line of work? Suit. I was forced into it. Me. Okay, by who? Silence. Me. Okay. Any goals or dreams you're working towards, like taking a vacation to fantasy Europe? Suit. Look, I don't want to talk to a mother's basement-dwelling neckbeard. That one hurt my pride. Mainly because my mother's basement is 4 states away. It's my house, and I was engaged at the time. DM looks horrified, as the rest of the table is laughing, and I just play up the dramatic hurt pride act as I take my dog outside. Guess I shouldn't have pushed too hard to RP with the suit. Sounds like his suit was wound so tight, the immovable rod stuck up his ass was starting to cut off his circulation. Get the fuck over yourself, bro, and enjoy the next 6 months of your unpaid internship. Might teach you a bit of humility. My name is Jacob Crow, and welcome to the Crow's Perch, where each week I delve into RPG horror stories from the profane to the unintentionally hilarious and bone-shakingly cringe. We got a couple goofs, we got a couple gaffs, we don't do boofs though. Don't do that. That's not good for your bowels. Anyway, we have 2 stories today. Our first story comes with a question, and I ask our DMs, preparation or improvisation? Often advice for new DMs revolves around the idea that you're just gonna have to figure it out. Don't over-prep, you're just gonna railroad your players. But as some have discovered, that with no prep at all, what the flock are you supposed to do when people start poking around your setting, or deviating entirely from the game that you had in your head? What if they ask about your world's history, and you look in confusion to the sticky note on your DM screen that says, "Sexy Goblin?" ? And you better remember what you told them, because they might ask again. And it'd be really weird if this goblin's the answer to all of your players' questions. You need stat blocks, you need NPCs, you need quests, you need factions. Even if you don't know where any of them are gonna be yet, you still have to write something down. This goes doubly so for a new DM who doesn't have entire monsters in the monster manual memorized, and can run calculus in their brains to map out character relationships, the push and pull of factions, and the entire 24-hour schedule of a bartender that they just made up on the spot. Improvisation alone cannot make a game, as the DM in this story soon finds out. So, without further ado, let's gather up a murder and dive right into this story. There is a key recommendation to upcoming DMs that I think a lot of people misinterpret. The suggestion to learn to improvise is a great one, because as all DMs will know, your party will eventually surprise you and venture into a direction you did not expect. This is advice that any DM should follow, or they're forced to relegate to the railroad when the party takes the alternate route. But some people think you should only improvise and make bare bones preparation. And maybe there are some really good DMs out there that have the ability to do that. But for most people, prep is absolutely key to making a good game. And here is why. I joined a homebrewed game about an empire that was currently going through political turmoil and losing foreign wars, greatly weakening it. It sounded very similar to my own game. So I joined up. I decided to play an Inquisitor-type character, trying to re-strengthen the empire by any means necessary. If the other players happened to want to rebel, then my character could be flexible enough to think a new revolution was necessary. We start the session off with the other two party members, Ranger and Bard, hanging around a tavern as I come to investigate a town. Bartender tells us bandits have been raiding the town, and the local magistrate is looking for volunteers. Cool. The other party members hear this and, low on coin, decide to join up with me. After about an hour talking and introductions, we decide to head our way to the magistrate. When suddenly, a nearby man grabs my character's hand and tells me to play card games with them. My character refuses. He's here on business. The man is insistent. We refuse thrice, and he still won't relent, causing my character to glare at him and ask why he's interfering with inquisitorial business. The DM asks me for an intimidation roll, and after a success, finally leaves us alone. We attempt to leave the bar, only to be stopped by the waitress. Waitress starts talking about how cool and powerful the party looks, and then starts blogging about her own life out of nowhere. We talk and try to leave, only for her now to offer services for gold. We refuse. She is insistent, and we again have to refuse several times before she finally backs off. But before we can, the ranger has to make a con save for the one ale he drank 30 minutes ago. And when he fails, goes unconscious, and we have to spend the next 10 minutes trying to wake him up. Finally, outside the tavern, we come across a beggar asking for money. We refuse, considering everyone is low on gold, and try to move on, only for the beggar to start clinging on to Ranger's leg. Ranger has to roll athletics, and when he fails, he tumbles to the ground while the beggar begs for money, and I have to draw my sword to get him to back off. As we make our way to the magistrate, a random man on a horse suddenly attacks us. Ranger shoots him and knocks him off his horse. Bard heals him up, and we demand answers as to why he attacked us. The man is very nonchalant in his attitude, refusing to answer even under the threat of sword. After asking him multiple times and threatening, he finally answers that he's part of some noble house and thought we were from a rival house. My character is incensed, asking why he would think total random strangers he saw were from a rival house. And the man just shrugs, going on and on about how he hates the rival house. I almost execute the man right there, only for us to be attacked again by another horseman. The DM telling us this time it's the man from the rival house. Oh, there he is. We found him, boys. The bard casts dissonant whispers on the horse, and we tell the DM flatly we just run away, so that we don't have to deal with this. We finally make it to the magistrate, only for the guard in front to ask who each of us are, and we need to give our background stories that we had already said back at the tavern. As the clock finally hits the 4th hour of session time, the DM starts clapping his hands and goes, "Perfect! The session went exactly 3 hours as I wanted. See you next week, folks." And if it wasn't obvious by now, the DM was throwing every single thing he could think of to prevent us from actually meeting the magistrate. He was throwing every single thing to eat up the session time as much as possible. Pretty annoying, but maybe he didn't have enough time. Next week is exactly the same. The magistrate greets us and tells us that we have to see a lieutenant at the other side of town for details on the bandits. We just spent 3 hours getting to this guy, and he tells us we have to see someone else. The bard asks why in the world he wouldn't have information on the bandits, and the magistrate shrugs and says it's not his position to know military affairs. I just want to know where the bandits are. The story's giving me secondhand insanity. Are the bandits even real? Who even knows anymore at this point? Is there even a town? Is there a lord? Is there even a magistrate? Is this Dungeons and Dragons or Pathologic fucking ball torture edition? I don't even know what's real anymore. Let's just get back to the story. So off we go to meet this lieutenant, only for a freaking storm to suddenly appear. The storm is so strong. The rains are so heavy. The wind's so powerful that midway through the town, we are forced to rest in a nearby house. In the house is a granny, and we offer her 1 gold piece from each of us after explaining our situation. The granny offers us food. We tell her no thanks, since we're already in her home and have rations. When we try to sleep, the granny then requests each of us to start fixing things in her house. Leaky roof, broken cupboard, a rat hiding in corner, dirty cooking pan, all of which require rolls and more time. An hour is spent in Granny's house before we can finally rest and move on. We meet the lieutenant, who, again, asks us for our backstories and why we want to help clear out the bandits. He finally tells us there are about 8 of them in a nearby forest. We go into the forest, only to be stopped by fallen trees blocking our ways. All 3 of us have to roll athletics about 5 times to clear the trees, and the DM goes to painstaking descriptions of how our characters' backs hurt and feel tired and hands are itchy if we roll anything below 10. DM tells us it's been half a day, and we need to make camp and long rest again. We decide to forage for food, and then the DM starts listing off every single animal and vegetables he can think of. Bard tells him he just wants to find vegetables that aren't poisonous, and then he starts listing off the same things again for some reason. Ranger says he's going to hunt for animals, and again, the DM starts listing off every possible animal he can think of in the woods. Ranger has to tell him that he will literally hunt anything, and after a survival check, runs across a rabbit. Ranger rolls to shoot with an 18, and misses? DM tells him the bushes, shrubs, and forest somehow made the Ranger miss with an 18. 18, mind you guys, is plate armor status. Ranger has to continue chasing the rabbit, and the DM just drags this session for another 10 minutes. Several of Ranger's shots still missing, until he finally lands a 23, which apparently was the magic number he needed to kill this rabbit. Trying to forage food and cook takes us an entire hour of session time. We finally get to do the rest. We resume our journey, and the DM says we find the bandit encampment. He starts clapping his hands again and goes, "Wow guys, another perfect 4-hour session ending right on time. This is going really well if I do say so myself. Okay, next week I'll get these bandit stats and find a map somewhere online for the battle." Yeah, I was done and quit the game. I perfectly understand that tabletop role-playing games aren't just finding a quest and doing a combat session, but when it takes 8 hours of forced interactions to finally arrive at the bandits we were supposed to fight, when things are being dragged out not for the sake of enriching a world, but to eat up time, and random weather and falling trees impede the path just for the planned session time, the game loses authenticity. Please, people, a good game has both great preparation and improvisation. I don't even feel like this guy didn't prep the game. The granny situation, the tavern opening, he clearly had ideas brewing in these locations, and desperately tried to get the characters to interact with them, but in the most inorganic way possible. It sounds like he just prepped a series of random encounter tables without any context for where or why these encounters would take place, and just threw them into the mixing pot without mixing it. As in, he didn't take the second step of making any concessions or bothering to fit them into the scenario the players thought they were getting into. The DM kind of constructed that the OP was going to be the de facto party leader, so it wasn't surprising that it would happen. But he should have known from character creation that this character is a no-nonsense inquisitorial type. Why then make a bunch of encounters filled with nonsense that you know the player is going to try to ignore to play into his character fantasy? But it wasn't just the OP. It seems like the entire party knew the tone they were going for, while the DM seemed completely oblivious to it. They wanted Warhammer Fantasy, and he gave them Weenie Hut Jr.'s Wacky Adventure Simulator. And that's not to say hijinks and breaks from the seriousness aren't welcome additions in the former, but just not like this. It all comes across as so forced. The DM clearly cared more about the time than how that time was spent. Let's move on. It's not unheard of for a D&D group to want to get wasted before a game. I mean, I think the company I tend to keep around would definitely agree.
You can make monsters fuckable, you know? I completely agree.
Look at those thighs in the male troll.
But most groups, rightfully so, should make sure their players aren't too drunk during a game session. Those books are pretty expensive, and the last thing you want is your chest full of Hero Forge minis, your rows of Wormwood dice trays, and your exclusive signed copy of Matt Mercer's Tal'Darai campaign setting Reborn to be soaked in rum and coke or submerged in a bottle of Bailey's. But these players take it a bit too far with some homemade absinthe they found on the internet. Yeah. So let's watch this chaos unfold. And so, without further ado, let's keep the murder going as we dive into this last story. If the title itself didn't give enough of a clue, this happened when I was in college, which for me was a little while back. I had a regular group that I ran with 3 players and myself, the DM. It was a pretty fun, casual group. We played mostly Old World of Darkness games and Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, and did so in the common area of one of the dorms. It was usual for random folks to stop by and watch, or even join in as an NPC, if they felt so inclined. My regular players were Carl, he, him, a classic grognard but really nice guy, huge fan of making characters that collect secrets, doesn't drink, which, as you can guess, is important later. Edward, he, him, a dude practically made of chaos energy. Always makes the characters that poke all the things. A DM goldmine, in other words. Ash, she, her. A crafty do-it-yourselfer, both in and out of play. Usually preferred to play scientists or hackers. Anyway, alcohol and energy drinks regularly flowed freely at the table, though usually not to excess. This in mind, Ash decided she wanted to make some alcohol of her own and bring it along to share. She found a recipe for absinthe on the internet, as she couldn't buy it directly, apparently, which involved taking Everclear and adding some mystery packets she also found on the internet, letting it sit for a while, and then quaffing it down. Being in college and not yet skeptical of mystery internet packets, I figured, what the hell, and gave her the green light to bring it along. And bring it along, Ash did. That fateful evening, we were playing Mage the Ascension, one of my favorite games of all time. The idea behind it is basically that it's a modern game, but the reality is what everyone believes that it is. But you're a wizard, and you can believe extra hard to make reality do what you want it to. If you think, for example, a weird blood sigil has the power to transmute corn into bees, you have enough training, and the dice like you, congrats on your new bee army. To anyone unfamiliar with Mage the Ascension, that's pretty much the gist of it. They use a lot of concepts like chaos magic, and even borrow one of its core concepts known as Gnosis, which chaos magic defines as an altered state of consciousness in a person's mind, focused on a singular point, which is even a statistic in the game. Cool occult facts with Crow! The catch is that if normal people see you doing things that clearly break reality, you get points of paradox, which the DM gets to gleefully cash in later, to cause reality to rebound horribly onto your character, in many imaginative ways. The game was well underway, and it was a long-running campaign at this point. We passed the absinthe around several times, and everyone agreed that it tasted, or smelled in Carl's case, flock awful. Fortunately, Edward had brought along a couple liters of Sprite, so we all made the grand decision of drinking the fakey absinthe with Sprite as a mixer. Coincidentally, this somehow completely masked the taste, such that after a few sips, we all pretty much forgot we were drinking alcohol. I'm sure you can guess where this is going. Now, I've got a pretty high tolerance, and Ash was nursing her drink, but Edward, chaos being that he was slamming back cups of Sprite synth like nothing. I stopped counting after cup number 4, honestly. After all, it seemed like it was only improving his role-playing. The first real warning sign, except for all the others, was when Edward started bobbing and weaving at the table. Like true friends, we got him some water and propped his head up on a stack of books. Problem solved. That is, until Edward said the fateful words. Guys, I don't feel so... Our collective first reaction was to scream and dodge backward from the neon yellow rocket of vomit exiting Edward's body. I'd say it was like the classic scene from The Exorcist, except it wasn't. Where the movie had a constant stream, Edward managed to produce something more akin to a concentrated shotgun blast of the most vile, nasty, rank vomit I've ever smelled in my life to this day. Then someone shouted, "The books!" Oh no. Our books that were propping Edward up, as well as our battle map, remained firmly on the table. Due to quick hands, or the sheer velocity of the puke, the books escaped mostly unscathed, but the battle map and several character sheets were straight up laminated in a greasy layer of sick. We stood back, abjectly horrified. Edward, gasping, met our eyes. "I'm so sore." And then the second wave hit. Less of a blast and more of a fountain. Edward produced a massive puddle that quickly formed a moat at our feet. Easily 3 feet wide at its thickest point. Oh god. It made all of us take a collective leap back as it hit the ground with force. At this point, I recall hearing a mild noise from Ash, who peeled out of the room as fast as her legs could carry her. Carl sighed in pure sobriety, threw his hands in the air, and walked out. Clearly sick of our shit, which, fair. That left me, the only one who could mildly tolerate the smell, to drag Edward out from the table, collect the rest of what could be salvaged in a trash bag, and attempt to clean up the catastrophe, with only a handful of paper towels and the power of positive thinking. I didn't really do well on any of those accounts, for the record. The smell had thoroughly filled the space at this point. Remarkable, because the common room was very large, about the square footage of a high school gym, with a much lower ceiling. Thankfully, no one else was present. Though during the cleanup, I did have several people come in and do an immediate about-face. Our cross-campus journey was punctuated at first by Edward apologizing repeatedly, but he finally settled on just having fun with it. He kept yelling, "I'm a mage," or "I'm a wizard," at different groups of people we ran into as we dragged him along. All of them who reacted about as you'd expect. When one group of girls stopped to watch, he even improvised a bit, drunkenly yelling out, "Don't watch me do magic, you'll give me paradox." Finally, we settled him into his dorm room, propped him up on some pillows, and thoroughly killed the mood for his roommate who had a girl over. Myself and Ash finally stepped outside, breathed some fresh air, and did a long stare into oblivion for a bit. Then, we made our way back to the common room, where we left the not absinthe, and poured the rest of it down the sink. Edward survived a day of unholy suffering the next morning. Carl, rightly, gave us shit over it for months to come. Ash vowed never to make internet alcohol again. And I, naturally, learned nothing from the experience at all. That's fair. To user singular anyone. No notes. This was an incredibly well-written story. 9 out of 10. Would drink internet absinthe again. Okay, maybe not that, but you know what I mean. So that's it for today's stories. If you enjoyed today's stories and would like to see more of them, then please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like on this video. Have a story of your own or want to share your thoughts on today's stories? Then leave a comment. Can't think of a comment? Then leave the comment, "Drink up," so I know you made it to the end of today's video. Want to give a crow $1? Then hit the join button, or follow the link in the description to my Patreon, where you too can support the channel for as little as $1 a month, and become a patron like our counts of quills, like Aaron Kados, Critical Kunik, Evix, King Drazil, Christian Pip, Cosmosis, Rikus, Vincent, Haley Thompson, Zero Fang, and Netscape Navigator.
But if you wish to become a baron, you must pledge more than that. Like Brittney Mars, Rimgrim, Rathiana the Nerd, Sara Warren, Specter Spark, ArsTorok, ghostleegon, MrHypocritical, Jesse Schoedel, KuntosWeasel, TechBlog, Kurestor, Cardespawn, Jester King, Lord Rende, Wormy, Den of the Drake, McEatley, and Onya.
They don't give as much as the Dukes of Feathers, though. Just, just saying. Like Elf, Craykard, Hexblading, Kai-veMind, TheSchoolBus, MirageVaxus, Quinn, Jarett Suhr, Blues Otters, Jarett Zemlin, Doc Salty 96, MulQueeny, and Acroth. And before we end today's video, I'll leave you with this week's Odd of the Week by one of our Dukes of Feathers, the Kai-veMind, depicting my character Masao Takeda from Crispy's Tavern Shadow over Kokonos as a thirst trap. I fight for no lord. I fight for no master. I fight for the simps that follow my Twitter feed. For 200 likes, I'll post a new video crushing a watermelon with my thighs. And with all of that, and the drool wiped off your keyboard out of the way, I'll see you next time. As the crow flies.